All right, I think we can start now. As other people are still logging in, I will start introducing the event then. Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Svetlana Borodina, a postdoctoral fellow at the Harriman Institute, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today for the event titled Queer Central Asian Activism. We have a fantastic panel of experts for you who are going to talk about the current state of queer and feminist activism across Central Asia. The event is co-sponsored by RUSA LGBT and the Oxus Society for Central Asian Affairs. Just a few words about the logistics before we begin. We are running this event as a webinar. The audience can tune in on Zoom and on YouTube, where we are streaming live. Please don't hesitate to ask your questions. You can do so by typing your questions into the Q&A feature if you are tuning in on Zoom. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please type your questions into the chat. We will pose your questions to the panelists during the Q&A session. Another important comment is that Russian language interpretation is available on those who are connected to us on Zoom. So if you prefer to have a Russian language interpretation, please connect through Zoom. Once you log in, there at the bottom of your screen, there's going to be a button through which you can select a language for interpretation, and you can choose the Russian language from the list that pops up. If you have any issues with accessing interpretation, please let us know in the chat and we'll do our best to assist you in accessing the interpretation. Finally, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Firuza Aripova, who will be the moderator of today's event. Firuza is a PhD candidate in world history at Northeastern University and a center associate at the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies at Harvard University. She teaches Soviet and post-Soviet history while working on her dissertation, tentatively titled Silencing of Same-Sex Desire in the Post-Soviet Space, Deconstructing the Soviet Legacy. She is the author of the chapter Queering the Soviet Pribaltica, Criminal Cases of Consensual Sodomy in Soviet Latvia, 1960s to 1980s, published in 2020 as part of Decolonizing Queer Experience, LGBT Narratives from Eastern Europe and Eurasia anthology. Her other article, The Ukrainian-Russian Virtual Flash Mob Against Sexual Assault, co-authored with Janet Johnson, was published in 2018. Firuza, it is so exciting to have you here, and I now turn it over to you.
Thank you for this kind introduction, Svetlana, and also welcome everyone. Welcome to our roundtable discussion, Queer Central Asian Activism, co-hosted by RUSA LGBT, the Oxus Society for Central Asian Affairs, and the Harriman Institute. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the graduate student workers' strike taking place here at Columbia University. We felt like it was all right to continue with the event today for a couple of reasons. First, because we have international speakers and it was going to be very difficult to reschedule the event. Further, the Harriman Institute does not actually employ any grad student workers. However, we would like to say that RUSA LGBT fully supports their fight for fuller healthcare, equitable wages, and simply respect from this large and wealthy university. We stand in solidarity with them. And first of all, we would like to thank our fantastic translator for this event, Anatoly Samochornov, and the instructions how to tune in for the Russian version of the event are provided in the chat. Please let us know if you have any issues. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our wonderful panelists. ZHANAR, I'm going to start with you. ZHANAR Sekerbayeva, who is one of the co-founders of the Kazakhstan Feminist Initiative, Feminita. She's a feminist, a powerlifter, and a poet. In her work, she aims at expanding the concept of gender in the general public discourse through activism by mainstreaming questions of gender identity in academia and making Central Asia visible as a region. And ZHANAR, I'm in all of your work, and I so look forward to you sharing your insight today. Our other speaker, MOHIRA Suyarkulova, is a researcher and an activist based in Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan. She teaches courses on gender and sexuality and conducts research on the sexual lives of LGBTQ plus people in Kyrgyzstan. She also recently co-authored the book on happiness for young, in the parentheses, and not so, LGBT, in a parenthesis, not only people, in Russian. MOHIRA, welcome, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you were able to join us today. And our last speaker, who I think is having a bit of a trouble tuning in, but hopefully he'll be here soon, is Anvar Latipov, who is a New York-based Uzbek American LGBTQI activist. So perhaps we could begin with ZHANAR, followed by MOHIRA, and hopefully Anvar will be able to join soon enough. ZHANAR, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Sorry, I'm in the trip to one of the city where we have another training and meeting with LGBTQ society, which in Kazakhstan became dangerous activities. For example, in Shymkent and Karaganda this year, we had not just oral threats, but also physical attacks. These trainings dedicated to women's rights in Kazakhstan, and one last day we always dedicate to LGBTQI society. We invite them to drink coffee, sometimes maybe beer or wine. And exactly these meetings are, targeted by local groups of men who call themselves religious. And it's very, not very comfortable sometimes to just, do your job. So my name is ZHANAR SEKERBAYEVA. I'm co-founder of Kazakhstan Feminist Initiative, and I'm thankful for all organizers of this meeting. And I maybe would like to say that I recently finished my PhD program, and I'm very happy to have so many scholars around me, and then have this experience in Japanese university and in the country where patriarchal structure is so strong and not liquid. And it was also another experience beyond of PhD program. And I would like to speak about how I do activism with my colleagues. First of all, with Gulzada, she's actually sitting next to me and peacefully having dinner. So it's really, when I was studying in PhD program, of course, for 4 years, I was a little bit distant from activism in Kazakhstan. But when I returned, I immediately started to be on the ground and do activism again. I'm sorry for background noise. What actually supports us and what gives us power? We have these questions, not just from journalists who are always interested, but they come only when some scandalous or, I don't know, threats happened, when they come and ask their questions. But it's very also useful for us to understand, for me and for Gulzada, what gives us power and what gives us motivation to continue. And actually, what we would like to mention, maybe it's, of course, our lack of knowledge, but before, I mean, when we started from 2014, 17, Gulzada, 14 or 17, Feminita? I always forget, когда мы начали. 2015. Yeah. Yeah, and we started it actually even not understanding how to do, meetings, what we should say to our local community of LGBTQ women, and we actually did not represent T women, for example, what should we do, and so on. And we started to study in Kyrgyzstan, in Bishkek, and I'm very thankful for Bishkek Feminist Initiative and for Labris and for other LGBTQI organizations, which actually gave us that kind of knowledge and that kind of practices. Because in order to answer to many people who think we came from Western academia or we came from Western activism, we always stress with Gulzada, we actually came from our Kyrgyzstani colleagues who shared activist knowledge with us. Of course, maybe it's, interconnected to Western practices and Western activism, but physically we came and studied from Bishkek sisters. So another thing, what gives us power, Personally, I try to do sports, and recently my coach, she did refuse to take me as a sportswoman. Although I had very good, and I would like to say very, fast results, because I was coming to my best form, to my best powerlifting form. But my coach refused to coach me in the future, because not because she was, I don't know, homophobic, because she knew I'm a lesbian, for example, and she knew it from the beginning, from the January of this year. But when I just put one video on TikTok where I was happy to share that I won in Karaganda, where the threat happened, where the attacks happened. And now I came to Karaganda and I took these golden medals and I'm showing it to you. It was the only message which I did in video for TikTok. And after that, I came to Almaty from Karaganda. I was so happy. And then coach started, actually she's a woman, she started to speak to me that, you know, ZHANAR, you did such video, which now is a problem for me, and my family is threatened by some haters, and our club, which of course consists mostly of men, and some of them came from Karaganda, they are not happy with your video. And you know, sometimes when you do something what supports your activism, you always cannot do something that supports your activism, because they, if I go into this situation, I should stop my sport. But sport give me power to continue my activism, so I cannot stop. Just now, for me, maybe short decision, I will continue powerlifting activities myself. I just look into online trainings, online seminars, and so on. Of course, now we have a lot of resources. You can watch everything. You can find any video if they are online, and of course. So this came from unexpected side, and sometimes what you do, for example, for me, it was a big shock, and I'm really stressed right now till nowadays, because I go to the same gym. I bought a big abonnement, a big period. I bought how to say, the ticket for this gym for a big period, because my coach was coaching me. So I had to buy. I cannot buy it twice. For us, I mean, people in Central Asia, you have to do your budget. You have to do economy. So I bought long period, and now I have to face every day, or 3 times a week, I have to face this coach and her husband, who excluded me from chat, from, you know, from that kind of communication. I'm not in their club anymore. And I have to see their faces. I have to see their posts, how they say they are a team and they do their job so best, so in such beautiful words, but actually they can exclude people. And I understand, of course, maybe they received real threats. Of course, I did not read their chats and so on, but it was really, really unexpected thing that you could be banned because of the happy video in TikTok about your victory. I did not do victory in Karaganda in activism, because police came and they sent us back in Almaty, and we felt us as criminals. In Shymkent, they used same strategy. They take us and put us to the train and said, you have to go to your cities back, because, you know, people not happy you came, you're lesbians and so on. But we said, our training is not about SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity. Our training is about women's rights. But of course, nobody listened to us. Until nowadays, we have response of Ministry of Internal Affairs. They did not prosecute anyone. Till nowadays, no person was persecuted. But who was in police station? Me, Gulzada, and other participants of our events. We were in police stations. This is how it works in Kazakhstan. Please do not think we are oil country. We country with human rights, I don't know, high index, or we do so many beautiful words we can say about Kazakhstan. But if you go to human rights, area or activism, you can see how police lie to you, how ministry try to not to investigate any case, and how every time we receive a lot of threats and we screen them, do screenshot, go to a lawyer and try to make it like in legal form. But these all threats, Ministry of Affairs said, we don't have enough information to investigate your case of threats, case of when people punched you in the face. So I was punched twice, maybe because I have some temperament, character. I try to resist or say some words when, violence coming. I cannot just stay and say, oh, of course, yeah, I will go with you so quietly to police station. No, at least I will shout about what is happening actually, that they are interrupting a public event dedicated to women's rights. Well, this is at least what I'm trying to do. Yeah. And of course, it's every day reflecting on this or forgetting this, because this pain from the beginning of the events did not came less. It's not less. It's the same size. It's me who have to, be bigger in order to adjust because it's on the same place. Yeah, sorry. So what we see now that Kazakhstan government even try not to use sexual orientation. We read in the answer of the Ministry of Internal Affairs that nobody discriminated by social orientation. So you are future academics. I give you new maybe concept idea from Ministry of Internal Affairs. It's not sexual orientation in Kazakhstan, it's social orientation, what they trying to refer. So social orientation exists. I would like just to mention that in all of our activism, what we see in this year, we see how anti-gender movement trying to be bigger, because they started from anti-vaccinated agenda and they now targeted on LGBT groups, LGBT activists or LGBT initiatives, women's rights, also on resisting to the bill of the law of resistance to domestic violence. And they targeting us every year since maybe from the last year, because the feminist march, what we had in Kazakhstan for the first time, it was sanctioned by Akimat. It happened first time. It was very historical. We gathered 1,000 participants, and they were mostly women and girls. So what we see now, how they trying to, nivellate, try to say that this feminist march was not about women, it was about some other issues, because Gulzadaya and ZHANAR participated. This not feminist, it's lesbian march. Of course, it's lesbian march, and it's women's march, heterosexual march, and it's transgender march, because we are so diverse, women are so diverse. And every time we try to speak to them, but their arguments not based on science, or they are not based on something that we could argue with each other, because we have talk show, we had so many interviews, we see sometimes each other eyes, but it's very difficult to discuss something with them, because we try to show them statistics or the results of our needs assessment research or another research on the right on health. But it's very difficult to understand what they exactly do want to do in Kazakhstan. So I don't want to take any more time, because I feel me a little bit, that I'm thinking. Maybe I even didn't answer to you what supports me. Everyday life, just you try to struggle and survive and eat properly and sleep. I mean, no secret, no surprises can be here.
ZHANAR, thank you so much for sharing. And the reality is gruesome, and sadly, I actually watched those videos when you were attacked in Shymkent, and I felt incredibly helpless. That I personally couldn't do anything, but I am again in awe of your work, and I'm wishing you a lot of strength and resilience, and I am with you in spirit and in solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our second speaker is I very much look forward to your insight.
Sorry, my connection broke up a little. So you introduced me, right? Because I missed. Okay, thank you. So yes, thank you, Firuza, and thanks to RUSA, LGBT, and Harman Institute, and Columbia University, and everyone else who organized this event and asked me to speak at it. So what I wanted to talk about today, it's been on my mind lately, because like ZHANAR, like many other activists in Central Asia, have been feeling burnt out, right? For the past several months, really. And for us, I guess like for activists all over the world, we've been facing like a series of traumas, right? One after the other. So in Bishkek, I was involved, for instance, in organization of Feminale, and it was a feminist exhibition, art exhibition, which was also attacked and became a subject of huge controversy in Kyrgyzstan, and it was in the news everywhere. Then I'm also on organizing committee of the Women's Day March, and our march has been also attacked. The authorities have been trying to ban it year after year, and you know, we still marched. And in 2020, a group of vigilantes, possibly associated with police, attacked the women, and instead of arresting the attackers, the police arrested us. So we had to spend several hours at the police station on Women's Day, you know, in a very good feminist tradition. And the march is also attacked on the grounds that it's really kind of a pride, LGBT pride in disguise, as if, you know, the queers hijacked the, you know, this beautiful holiday for women. And by women, yeah, the majority of people understand only cisgender heterosexual women. So, you know, the women who actually organized the march, by that definition, many of us don't fall into this category of womanhood. And yeah, so, and then we had the pandemic, and also the challenges that it presented to the activist community here. And I just, you know, can't recall all the instances, basically, like in the past couple of years, where it's one defeat after the other, and one challenge after the other. And it's really hard, yeah, to avoid feeling very helpless and hopeless. I'm also teaching at university, at the American University of Central Asia in Bishkek. And we have a lot of Afghan students. And this year, you know, people had to be evacuated out of Kabul University. So they're now in Bishkek taking classes with me and other professors at the university. And when I consider what happened with Afghanistan, and I think about what is going to happen to our activism in, you know, the other countries of Central Asia, I can't help but think that, you know, it's us. You know, are we gonna be those people who are hanging on the wheels of the departing planes? And Joe Biden actually said that at an event commemorating 9/11 in Pennsylvania, when he said, yeah, imagine if we were, if a plane was departing for the States from Tajikistan, and we would say that, we would evacuate all the sympathizers, then of course there would be people hanging on the wheels, right? So it was a very kind of blunt and cynical dismissal of the criticism of how the United States basically betrayed a lot of the people who worked with the United States, who are activists, yeah, and we kind of have this double bind, right? So I'm not saying that the intervention in Afghanistan was a feminist war, even though it was described as such, right? That the liberation of women was kind of used as an excuse for invading the country. So in Central Asia, we're kind of in a similar double bind, right? So on the one hand, we have this ideas about feminism being something that is brought in from outside, right? And we also have this kind of a imperialist project, the feminist project, right? And also this kind of homo nationalist project of like, justifying imperialist foreign policy by saying, look at the women's rights, we look at LGBT rights. And on the other hand, at home, we have the nationalist projects, right? The governments who are trying to assert their sovereignty on the backs of women and queer people, right? It's always at our expense. It's our bodies become these battlegrounds, right? On which this national and international politics are played, right? Where the boundaries are drawn. So yeah, so I think this kind of binary of the West and global South is of course simplistic, and it fails to consider that the West is also shrouded in its own intersectional structural inequalities and gendered violence, and also that it's this binary that basically calls to save the women and the queers, like brown women and brown queers need to be saved by white men, from conservative brown men. It's also not a very helpful narrative because it denies the agency of the people on the ground. It kind of erases the history of feminist and queer struggles in our countries, right? So when we look at also this the processes that are happening in the activism in the region that also contribute to this feeling of hopelessness and helplessness and burnout. It's to me, it's this depoliticization of activism, right? Where basically issues are presented in a kind of technocratic way, right? So empowerment becomes about, giving trainings or microphones or, basically, LGBT issues, women's issues are not seen as political issues. And I'm someone who is a believer in, politics, and I kind of recall this analysis by James Ferguson of development projects in Lesotho, where he calls, NGOs and international development agencies anti-politics machine. So it's kind of what we've been observing also in activism here, and I think it's probably a global trend. So this kind of NGOization of activism, professionalization, institutionalization, depoliticization, and bureaucratization of activism, where we have this kind of technocratic ethos, is also very dispiriting to me. And so I think like when activist burnout is discussed in the activist circles here, it also becomes kind of a technical issue. It becomes a kind of a matter of self-management. It becomes kind of very simplistic idea of like self-care and kind of taking certain steps to avoid burnout, and it's never seen as a political issue, which it is. So basically burnout is caused by failure in the existential quest for meaning, right? And I also wondered when I was feeling burnout, I wondered, do the Kyrgyzstan, right, like these nationalist groups that attack us, do they get burnt out? Because probably not. And the reason for that is because they have very clear, tangible objectives that they very successfully achieve. Whereas when you are in more kind of radical social activism, your objectives are so big, right? You want to change the whole society, you want to change the world, and it's really a hard objective to achieve. So, you just continue failing all the time, and then you become burnt out because of that. I think for us, it's very important to also kind of formulate very concrete goals for our activism, so that we can get this sense of achievement. And for me, it's been quite hard lately. Maybe like for people who work more in the field, like ZHANAR and Gursada, who do kind of outreach work, or, like they can feel tangible results, like, yeah, I've assisted someone today, And I also do some kind of work, like, for instance, I've been contacted several times about like evacuations of queer people, or about writing expert statements for refugees, like asylum seekers, queer people from Central Asia. So at least I can feel like, okay, I've done something here. But when I write like an academic article or a report on my research, it's kind of like, it's always iffy, like, have I actually done anything useful? So yes, I think for us, it's very important to think about these things, and also to think of the ways that we can foster like international solidarity in feminist and queer activism, because the domestic struggles are closely interconnected with international politics. So ZHANAR mentioned, for instance, this anti-gender movement. It's a global phenomenon that originates in the conservative churches in the United States, right? These pastors, they go around the world, they push through this homophobic and anti-women legislation. They are very organized, they're very well funded, they're very motivated. I don't think they get burnt out. We have to have this vision, for instance, also how, for instance, Black Lives Matter movement in the United States can, be in solidarity with our movements in Central Asia, because these instances of structural inequality and violence, the settler colonial past in the United States, the imperialist international politics, they're very closely connected to the internal domestic violences, right? And it's just historically proven, yeah, like the same tactics for policing, for basically crushing the internal dissent, radical movements for change. They are either first, tested at home and then exported, or they, exported from the imperial conquests and practices of domination abroad, and yeah, like in the United States, there's this whole apparatus of the police and immigration services that target minorities of all sorts. So yes, I think connecting words at home and abroad is very important, and yeah, I think I'll stop here, and hopefully we'll get some time to reflect around these issues later in the Q&A. Thank you.
Mohira, thank you so much for this honest and sobering insight of yours. I look forward to asking you more questions, and as I told Janar, I'm standing in strong solidarity with you. Our next speaker, Anvar Latipov, is a New York-based Uzbek-American LGBTQI activist. You can also find him on Twitter at Anvar-Latipov. But Anvar, the floor is all yours.
Hi, can you guys hear me? All right, thanks. Thank you so much for the invite. It's such an honor to be among Titans like Mohira and Janar, and just like be so proud that we have people in Central Asia like you who are fighting for feminist rights, for LGBT rights, in general, just for human rights. And of course, I'm very happy to see a moderator, Firuza Ripova, as well. So I actually want to start with queer issues in Central Asia or around the world where homosexuality is outlawed. That the priority for activists or for LGBT people is their right to leave, because in many countries, including Central Asia, in Turkmenistan and in Uzbekistan, there is still a sodomy law, and in countries like Iran and some African countries in Afghanistan and Pakistan, there is still a death sentence for people who identify as gay, or for people who were caught during sexual intercourse. So I think basically, in our parts of the world, we're just fighting for our right, for the priority, and for our right to live, first and foremost. And of course, that fight also includes to have a dignity to lead a life that we deserve. And interconnectedness between LGBTQI rights and feminist rights, there's so many angles to connect, because we as a community both feel like we are not represented, we are not part of society, and people in power, they don't want to change status quo. They want to be in power and grab that power and never leave. But at the same time, for their failures, find the scapegoats, and most of the time it's LGBT people and feminists who are, by their words, bringing in the Western values into a society, which is kind of bullshit. I'm sorry for the language. A few words about me. I was born in Samarkand in Uzbekistan. When I was 18, I moved to Russia. And 2014, I immigrated to the United States. I'm an asylee and an American now. And I sought asylum based on my orientation. I knew that I would not be able to leave a life that I want or deserve in Uzbekistan. I came out to my family members in 2015. But earlier in my life, I came out in different stages to my friends, to my coworkers, and but when I came out to my mom, she cried for 3 days, and we still talk, but my mom never asked me anything about my personal life because she doesn't want to know, either she doesn't understand, and it's kind of don't ask, don't tell situation. With other family members, mostly male family members, situation is a bit worse because they literally don't talk to me, or they disowned me, some of them. There's all this family relationship also like speaks about the attitude in a community, which is me coming out, me breaking the status quo, me telling the world that I'm a gay a man from Uzbekistan, is not what they wanted to hear. They wanted me to conform to traditions, to the way of their life, and do the things like some of them told me, why don't you just keep it to yourself and do the things on the side, while also like creating a family, having kids, without realizing that doing that would destroy someone else's life. Like, and my rhetorical question was like, okay, now think about that. You have a daughter, and the way you're talking to me right now is you have a daughter, and what if your daughter marries someone like that? Would you be happy? And of course, they turn off the phone and they don't talk to you, they don't ask you any more questions. So me coming to America and realizing that that I grew up with internalized homophobia, like every other gay man or a member of LGBT community. Where I grew up was so much hatred towards who I am, and of course it had its effects on my mental health, on my life in general. But coming to America and seeing that there is freedom to be who I am and to lead the life that I deserve, it actually empowered me to be more active and do something for the community that doesn't have a voice, specifically in Uzbekistan, the LGBT community. I remember the Pride event that I attended in New York, and the messages of love that I received from young Uzbeks who live in New York or around the world. And there was this girl which made me so happy. She is half Uzbek, half Palestinian. She lives somewhere in Europe, and her message, like, it actually made me cry. But there were a lot of moments of people reaching out to me and saying, thank you. This actually made me look at myself differently. But there were more messages of hate and death threats. And most of them, of course, I blocked and deleted. But especially in the first few days of me appearing in one of the prides with Uzbek flag, brought a lot of attention to me. But I guess life continues, and as MOHIRA pointed out about the people burning out, I think it happened to me as well, kind of few times, but it hit me more during the COVID because of like millions of others, I lost family members, and I was not in the right space to talk or do anything to support the community. Still trying to do some things on Twitter, but not as active as I used to be. So that's like one of the things that COVID did to us as a community, losing family members, and as well as like burning us out in terms of activism. I guess I'll stop here and we'll answer the questions if there are going to be questions. So.
Thank you so much, Anvar. And I told it to everyone, I'm also in awe of the work that you do, and I'm really proud of our friendship and our activism together. So due to the nature of the simultaneous interpretation, dear Russian speakers, I apologize. We'll have to take a 5-minute break because our interpreter needs to like take a bit of a breath, a really short break. But our speakers, perhaps we could just brainstorm the questions. There are a few questions in the Q&A box. And then once Anatoly tunes in, we'll continue with Russian interpretation. Again, my apologies. So a question from Ardarsher Hashimov. I apologize if I didn't pronounce your name right. Forgive me if this has already been addressed, but what role does language play in your advocacy? In Tajikistan, for example, most conversations about gender and sexuality are happening in Russian, making knowledge production and advocacy surrounding these issues inaccessible to people who don't speak Russian. Do you see this as a challenge to gender and sexuality advocacy in Central Asia? Anyone can take up the floor on the language. Mahir, perhaps you have a couple of.
Yeah, I think we lost Zhanar.
Oh, she said that she will reconnect because they're closing the cafe where she's at. So she's going to be back.
So yes, definitely language is an important issue. And I don't know, I mean, I know activists from Tajikistan, and they do very important, kind of outreach and direct help kind of work, as well as, like community building work. And that, of course, happens in Tajik. So there are specific like efforts, I know in Kyrgyzstan for translating the terms and, finding terms that don't carry stigma. And like, in English, there is this practice of appropriating language of hate, right? And basically making it a kind of a self-marker, self-identity marker that is carried with pride, right? So this hasn't really happened in Central Asia, but my colleagues and friends, Georgy Mamedov and Nina Bagdasarova, the co-authors of the Happiness book, they just recently published an article in Russian in a French journal to make it accessible also to people in Central Asia, because it's still a lingua franca in the region, right? And there, the title is Tema о не LGBT, right? So it's the tema is the word, for instance, that people in the post-Soviet space, so everywhere where people speak Russian, yeah, they know this word that is very different from this identity politics-based language of LGBTQ plus communities, right? So it's about it's about being part of subculture, it's about sociality rather than sexuality. And there are different also ways that people, for instance, in south of Kyrgyzstan, where people speak Kyrgyz and Uzbek, like they also use specific words for connoting like relationships. So there are like circles, and like there are queer families that have like mothers and daughters and sisters. So this is specifically about homosexual men culture. So it kind of resembles the ballroom culture in New York in the 80s, with the houses, and like you have also a mother, right, and children. So they also have like these circles, and you know, mamki, dochki, and right, and like also terms like, you know, malika, like princess, and you know, like there's different. It's also a very rich culture that exists across Central Asia, and yeah, sometimes we have this kind of delimitation that, like, you know, NGOs who work on LGBTQ rights advocacy, they use the language of LGBTQ rights, and you know, you know, very politically correct language, whereas, you know, so there is this disconnect, yeah, between how people experience their existence as queer people and this language of human rights, and oftentimes like very medicalized language of, like, you know, HIV prevention and things like that. So I think, yeah, it's a very important matter to develop our own ways of understanding and talking about our existence.
Yeah, thank you, Mahira. And I kind of feel like I want to jump in and perhaps add that certain words related to sexuality, one's sexuality or same-sex desire, they sort of need to be reclaimed. For example, in Uzbek, the word bisokol that was used to define a homosexual man or man who was attracted to the same sex. For instance, in one of Abdullah Qadri's novel, he uses that the certain man had his own bisokol, right? But if you look at the legal language, the article that bans homosexuality is bisokol bozlik. So you can't exactly use the term because it's been tainted, right? It's been it's used in such a legal and sort of derogatory term. And similar work actually Nikolai Gorbachev is doing with the Russian word pider, which basically means an F word in English, but he's also trying to sort of reclaim that. So I definitely think you touched upon very interesting and important point of reclaiming the language. Anvar, perhaps you have something to add while Zhanar is trying to reconnect to us.
I actually wanted to add the same thing that you said, so you were ahead of me. And but the point is, I feel like reclaiming the language, and language is important to in order to educate the population. So, and I feel like as much as the government, let's say in Uzbekistan, tries to not include new words in official circulation, it's still happening because of internet, and the world is connected way better now. And feminist activists and gay people, proudly gay people in Uzbekistan, using words that changing the narrative in terms of reclaiming the certain words. So.
There's an anonymous attendee who basically said there's a new desk study that will be presented on November 30th towards decriminalization of consensual same-sex conduct in Uzbekistan. And I'm gonna put it into the chat box if anyone is interested to access that. There's a question from Edward Lemon. And again, I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name correctly. Thanks, Zhanar, Mohira, and Anvar. As you briefly mentioned, your brave and important activism involves considerate risks to yourselves and your networks. What techniques do you use to keep yourself and your community safe? And Zhanar is connecting back, but perhaps Mohira, we could start with you and Zhanar and then Anvar.
Yeah, I mean, activists, yeah, have their own strategies for security and safety, but also like people in the community also have certain practices that they use. And again, our colleague Nina Bagdasarova wrote a paper on security escapes of LGBTQ, and like it's co-authored, and it also includes Luli community in Kyrgyzstan. so if anyone is interested in reading it in English, but yeah, like you know, it's also like kind of common techniques that I guess activists use, you know, like what kind of messengers do you use? And for instance, one country in the region is never named by its name, like in the communications, and they use a different country name too when they mean that country, because that's the degree of secrecy, right? So or you know, like the like submission of reports to the UN bodies cannot be done safely by activists in certain countries in the region, so it's done by an anonymous like coalition that was created specifically for that purpose. So there's all kinds of strategies of, like, you know, ensuring safety of day-to-day activities, but also kind of, you know, this regional solidarity. So ZHANAR probably can talk more about that.
Yeah, sorry, because I had to change the location. Can you please repeat the question?
Yes, the question was, how do you, what techniques do you use to keep yourself and your community safe?
Yeah, okay, so yeah, when we have events that dedicated to LGBT community, you have to understand in which city, unfortunately, you're doing them. So in Almaty and Astana, we can do open, you know, open events, invite many people, celebrate our days or do trainings. But in another cities, we have to, so for example,
Yeah, I think we lost a connection with ZHANAR. Perhaps Anvar, you could, if you want to talk a little bit, and then we will reconnect. Oh, are you back, ZHANAR? Okay. Anvar, why don't you go ahead, and then we will.
Sorry, yeah, my connection was lost on, should I repeat again? Okay, so I mean, for example, now I am in Uсть-Каменогорск or Oskimen with Gulzada, and we had to come here incognito because, according to our previous experience, coming to another cities, sometimes it can be dangerous for your life and safety. So we rent this apartment, for example, where I am now after the little bit loud cafe. We have to rent this apartment using another ID. So our ally helped us this time, but in Shymkent and Karaganda, we didn't use that practices. And of course we did all, like, you know, open, hotel recognized us, people around us recognized us, and it was, yeah, dangerous. So, but what I'm trying to say, Almaty and Astana is a different experience. We do our events open, people come, we celebrate many activities together, we gather, we do trainings. But in another cities, I don't know why Akimat or Ministry of, for example, Information and Public Development, why they do not to speak each other, because actually it should be the same. So in one city you can be beaten, in another city you are welcomed, because nobody interrupted our events in Almaty and Astana. We didn't remember that time when it actually happened. But in Shymkent and Karaganda, and we hope tomorrow everything will be good, and we will have our training in Usk-Kamenogorsk, and after that LBQT meeting. Nobody knows even the address. Everybody writes us, where are you? So we will announce our address like in the night or 2 hours before the event. So we should use this practice to make people safe. And also we have to always warn people that, if you participate in our events, it could be that police will wait us, or a mob of religious, they call themselves religious men, will come and try to interrupt the event. So it's not easy, because every time we feel with Guzada disappointed, because we are not criminals. We're not speaking about terrorism, Molotov's cocktail, or some other things. We speak only about women's rights. But we also feel that this is something very illegal, because we speak a little bit quietly in cafe. Today we ate food and we speak a little bit quietly because a lot of men sitting there. But we speak about usual stuff, our schedule, flight, when we should buy coffee tomorrow. So it's like, and you have to just understand that in different cities in Kazakhstan, local government, Akimat, and police, they could react on your activities, focusly LGBT, in a very negative way. So they use LGBT to mobilize people, or to show how the city, I don't know, non-inclusive, or we even don't know why they do that, because it's very shameful practice, because we announce this practice in our reports, in high officials, through the embassies or through the alternative reports. We do this attacks and threats becoming more public, and we name the name of the inspectors who come, we name people who we can recognize and who do these threats. Yeah.
Thank you, Zhanar. Anwar, do you have anything to add?
The one thing that I wanted to add is, in my case, if I talk to someone in Uzbekistan, we use the apps that cannot be accessed, or the messages deletes themselves after. I'm not gonna mention the names, but if I'm talking about people who are in Uzbekistan, I don't usually mention their names for their safety. So that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you. And there's a follow-up question from Anthony Boyer. Anwar, do you have any hopes that the reforms promised by President Mirziyoyev will lead to greater recognition and support for the rights of the LGBTQI community in Uzbekistan?
Well, maybe in the beginning I had hopes, but at this stage, after 5 years of a process of opening up the country and changing a lot of stuff that previous regime literally made impossible for people to live, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. I do recognize the changes in the country, and I applaud them, and I feel it's great that people can come and visit the country from around the world without obtaining a visa. I applaud some domestic policies that actually made life easier for people to travel or to do business. And I love that they're showing cases of corruption or forced labor, and they have infomercials about if you're being forced to pick cotton or do any type of forced labor, please report and we will investigate. All these things, changes are great, but we're not seeing any changes in terms of actual human rights issues, or most importantly, at least the decriminalization of sodomy law. We were hoping it would happen, but not sure when or if it will happen. So no.
Yeah, and in light of that, perhaps we could also mention one of the recent protests in the center of Bishkek, which was profoundly homophobic, and the blogger who was physically attacked as well. And that's something that is that is quite new. The sort of this nationalistic policies or this nationalistic sentiment mixed with the religion. I mean, you didn't really see any protests when Karimov was there, and this is definitely was quite shocking. Okay, somebody was, I'm just going to take this question. Somebody was interested in Nikolai Gorbachev's work, and particularly his desire to reclaim the word Peter, and I'm more than happy to put his article in the chat. Okay, Zhanar, there's a question for you. С чего, and it's in Russian, с чего начать активистскую деятельность? Какова главная ЛГБТ плюс повестка сегодня? And again, those of you who don't speak Russian, please click on the interpretation and you'll be listening to our simultaneous interpreter.
Да, тогда отвечу на русском. Мы начинали нашу ЛГБТ-деятельность с того, что изучили потребности сообщества, потому что я и Гульзада представляем только вообще одну букву и двух людей на планете Земля, так густо населяющейся с каждой секундой. Поэтому мы не могли представить, какой опыт у других таких же девушек, как лесбиянки, как мы, или, например, у бисексуалок, у квир-женщин. Потом мы уже стали добавлять повестку транс-женщин, потому что мы подружились с транс-инициативой. Мы хотели изучить сначала, какие вообще девушки, кто они, ЛБК. Поэтому мы наше первое исследование посвятили оценке потребностей ЛБК женщин в Казахстане. И вот так очно, как мы сейчас приезжаем, только мы тогда ездили не инкогнито, мы очно ездили по 16 городам, и более у нас было где-то, если я не ошибаюсь, 216, что ли, участниц, которых мы опрашивали посредством анкеты, а затем глубинных интервью, задавали им вопросы по различным сферам. Это могло быть и здоровье, и их экономико-социальный портрет. А затем мы выясняли, насколько вот девушки, в каких именно нуждах они, ну, скажем так, запросы для них какие актуальные. Они сами выбирали и писали. И с некоторыми мы проводили глубинные интервью, где уже более точно и конкретно могли узнавать, какие вообще стоят вызовы. Но что мы вот самое запомнили с Гульзадой, 50% вот опрашиваемых наших респонденток ответили, что они казашки и лесбиянки. И мы так вот разбили миф чиновников о том, что в Казахстане не существует женщин, казашек, лесбиянок. Ну как не существует? Вот сейчас вот лежит вот на диване уже не кушает ужин Гульзада, казашка, и вот перед вами вынуждена называть свою identity, ну вот казашка Жанар. Вот что с этим поделать? Помимо таких, вот мы в 16 городах столько нашли, и у нас действительно есть и круги, и статистические данные, сколько себя девушек именно так называли. Вот, мы начали с оценки потребностей сообщества. Это было более, ну, как мы посчитали с Гульзадой, наверное, на тот момент важным этическим даже шагом. Спасибо.
Спасибо, Жанар.
Next,
go ahead, Tanvar, yes, please.
I just want to add about the identity politics in Central Asia. I remember at one of the prides when I was carrying Uzbek flag, and a friend of mine was carrying Azerbaijani flag. And you know, I think the pictures got circulated, and even Fergana wrote an article with our picture on it. And reading the comments, like I would laugh so much because most of the people writing in Uzbek were like, "Oh, I think this guy was planted from, you know, from Caucasus region of Russia, or from Caucasus, or from even they mentioned, I don't know, Israel. I don't know what Israel has to do with this." It was like very, very interesting to observe how, you know, like in France, it just correlates to the things that happen in France with Arabs, right? Like when they, the football players, when they, like, there was this one tweet, the football player, right, tweeted saying, "When I score a goal, I'm French. When I don't, I'm an Arab." So if I did something in a scientific way, or like, you know, brought some fame to the country, I would be Uzbek. If not, then I'm a minority. So, and I feel like the same happens in every other Central Asian country. They always like find a way to point out that, oh, you're not a, как сказать, титульная нация. Like, yeah.
Titular.
Yeah, titular, titular ethnic representative. So you don't represent us and don't call yourself that you are Uzbek, or, just wanted to add.
Thank you. The next question is from Sam, and it also kind of goes along with what you just talked about, Anwar. I'm wondering if you could talk about the role of Islam and or Muslim identity in your activism. I am interested in how you encounter Islamophobia from some groups and then homophobia from other groups, all while trying to navigate your cultural and spiritual ties to Islam. That's a wonderful question. Perhaps Mohira, we could start with you.
Yeah, like I personally I'm not a spiritual or religious person. I'm an atheist. So, and one of the reasons why I actually realized that I'm not religious or I don't believe in gods is because of how badly they treat women and queers. So I just, yeah, like among other like philosophical, intellectual reasons, right? Didn't want to be like, I don't, if I'm not welcome, then why do I want to be part of it? But it is definitely very important for a lot of people in the community. And like we did this study, for instance, about sexual lives of LGBTQ people in Bishkek. It was like a participatory action research that I led with Labris, an LGBT organization. And one of the things that came up, even though it wasn't kind of in the design of the study, right? People do talk about it. And a few people in the community who identify as Muslim have kind of tried also to gain education about this connection of queerness and Muslimness. And I know that, for instance, in South Africa, there's a big kind of school of, basically there is a mosque and imam, who is Muslim and queer. And so a few activists from Central Asia actually went to South Africa to explore these topics, right? And kind of try to negotiate and reconcile, I guess, these identities that appear to be in contradiction. So like for me personally, it's not an issue, but yeah, definitely for a lot of people it is. And unfortunately, the way that religion is generally discussed in a society is just not conducive to kind of challenging the dominant interpretations in general, right? So it's like quite authoritative, kind of based in this state-affiliated institutions of muftiyat that have this official version, but we know that it's like Islam is becoming globalized all over the world, right? So people travel, they can turn to internet for new kind of currents and interpretation and finding new communities. So yeah, I guess this may become part of the mainstream conversation at some point, but at the moment it's just a very conservative version of Islam that is seen as in direct contradiction to be queer.
Thank you, Mohira. Zhanar and Anwar, if you have anything to add.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. What we see actually in activist field, that actually religion, I mean, particularly Islam, is used as a coverage of things that made against LGBT. So it could be not just conservatism or, you know, trying to refer Kazakh people to the past. Actually, Islam is not the past of, you know, Kazakh nomads. It's not the end of the, when we look to the history, people stop their view only on Islam. What about Tingrianstvo? What about other beliefs that, of course, were in steps because people were migrating? They believed in many nature power. They believed animals. Who speak about animals today? They just ask the society to look into the past where only Islam is situated. But it is not true, of course. People do not feel this way. But government using religious people, I have to say, they're using them as some group that actually reflects the politics of government. And it, of course, it coincident with the, it goes synchronically with the Russian government, I think, agenda, because what we see is very close with anti-gender, with anti-vaccine activities. And we found, for example, in Fact Check, our website, which did a lot of, you know, articles about from where actually the единство осознанных, the unity of thinking people came, who actually attacking LGBT and vaccine. They came from Russia, and it's so, it's very, I'm feel very sad because one group is used by government, which is using this group, and they sometimes using them and actually put into the jail, for example, as it happened when people, Kazakh people came from Syria back. We discussed with Gulzada today how these people, men went to jail, and only women and babies and children went to center of adaptation, and how they, you know, stigmatize again people who actually were given some freedom. If you look exactly what is in Kazakhstan, which religions are, you know, more preferable, you can find it very easy. Just calculating mosques. We do not have new kindergartens. We do not have new something new, which we can just say, oh, wow, this is so beautiful. This is some center of education, or robototechnics, or Star Academy. Something academy, we have only mosques everywhere. And some of them supported hiddenly by local governments again and again. And they use again these religious people when they have to do something bad, but not by their hands. So they use these religious people, and I'm very sad they choose Islam, men believing in Islam. I feeling bad for them, but another day I feel angry at them because they just do what governments say them to do. So people who attacked us came as Islam people. And we cannot find till nowadays with Gulzada, where is in Quran, you can find words, please come to event, interrupt and beat, or violate, or something. There is no violence in Quran, so please show us, please, we would like to speak on that ground. We cannot find these words. It's about love, we can find love, we can find communication. Of course, it's not about women's rights, unfortunately, but still, we cannot find these words, go and beat. So poorly, what we can see, this group allow government to use them. And I don't know, for whom should I feel more sorry? For government or for this religious man? Because both of them are men, they are patriarchal, they are something that have in their mind. But if you look to perspective further, there is actually no reason. For example, in Aktobe, the one city which really call very religious themselves, they call them really, you know, Islamic man people in Aktobe. Okay, what we see? They do meeting against the bill on safety and how to say protection of animals. And why would you like to ask? Because they use dogs in fights. So these Islamic believing in Islam men, of course, not all of them, of course, Aktobe men do not want to keep solidarity with ecological activists and zoo and anti-zoo and how to say animals rights activists because they use dogs in the fights. I do not have any comments on that because I feel me broken every time when I hear what actually religious people trying to do. They do not do new kindergarten, they do not do new trees. We do not see any ecological actions, but in Aktobe, number one problem now is water, because oil is taken from the ground or from the surface, but nobody cares about the quality of water, and people are dying there. Religious people worried about not about the mothers of many children that are in Aktobe high numbers, and they live in barracks, not in houses. They are worried about that they have to use dogs in the fights, period.
Thank you, Zhanar. That's horrifying. Anvar, you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Zhanar said. I totally agree with this. I love how religious men don't notice corruption, poverty, unemployment, bad roads, stagnating economy. But they see is if a woman speaks up, that's not what, like, she should not speak about her rights, or when they see any type of a change in terms of human rights or LGBT people talking about themselves, that's what they attack, right? They don't wanna see the actual issues that are in the country, the class issue, issue of class, issue of corruption, people in government using their positions to influence things and enriching themselves. They don't see those things, like Zhanar mentioned. They only see us, the feminists, the queer people. And it's interestingly that there was a, I forgot the name of the person. He is I think he's a director of Tashkent Islamic Center. It's just being built now. On one of the programs, what he said was like, it's okay to beat up your wife. So I don't know what to say if it's coming from a person who's going to be leading International Islamic Center in Tashkent. And but this is not like it's very common now, because men, if we look at the history of all of this, people using religion is like, it all comes from men in power and men in general, because they don't want to give up the power. And of course, they're going to use religion and in their own favor to keep that, to be in power, because those people who are religious and I don't know, they feel like they can either they can have them as an attack dog, the government. But when the time comes, they can also throw them in jail, say, oh, these people are terrorists. So that's like what I wanted to add.
Yeah, and also, sorry.
So one more thing, I also have to say that I see some good changes in some countries of the world, like in Germany, in France. I think even in America, there are communities who are openly gay and Muslim, and they have their own religious facilities that they go, like mosques, they go and pray there. And I have to say, majority of American Muslims that I have encountered, pretty open-minded. They may wear, women may be covered, or men can be religious, but they are pretty open-minded, and they actually talk about LGBT rights. And the Imam of NYU, one of the Imams of NYU, actually, in his sermons, he talks about that we have to protect LGBT rights. So some changes are happening, I have to say. I don't want to paint it very dark. Some changes are happening, and of course we want to see more. So
Thank you. Mohira, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, if we have time, I just kind of remembered. So one of my Afghan students actually wrote her bachelor thesis on the case of killing of a woman in Kabul in 2015. Her name was Farhunda, and it was in the news a lot. Probably you heard about it. And she was brutally murdered by a mob because she challenged like a religious figure who was selling amulets, in the city center. So he was selling these little pieces of paper with, prayers or like excerpts from Quran, and then they're folded into an like tumar, amulet. And so these are supposed to heal or protect, and so she challenged because she was herself a theology student, and she challenged this practice as superstition and non-Islamic, and she was basically brutally murdered in a public space. And these were not, like Taliban. These were not specifically religious men. A lot of them were, dressed in European style, who would consider themselves modern Afghans. And this was during the US occupation of the country. So, so the real matter here is not some kind of religious dogma. It's about who has the authority to speak on behalf of religion, who has the authority to interpret, Quran, and have this authority to be the voice of, basically, yeah.
I think we lost Mahira for a second. I think we lost you for a second, Mahira. Just the last couple of sentences.
Sorry. So I was saying it's about who holds the power, who has the authority to speak on behalf of religion, right, and interpret the sacred texts. So it's not so much like a theological, philosophical discussion. So a woman is not, and a queer would not be allowed to say this is in Quran or this is the correct interpretation, or so I think, like again, we shouldn't focus so much on the text, but on the context.
Thank you, Mahira, so much. We have about 5 more minutes, and perhaps I could pick 2 more questions. Someone is asking, and that's also my question to all of you as well. I'm an academic in a Western country, and I focus my research on Central Asia. My question is, which, if any, kind of research agenda could be helpful to Central Asian LGBTQ+ communities? Anwar, do you want to start? Sorry.
Oh, well, I'm not, I'm not in academia, but but I think the agenda, the most helpful one would be, I guess, writing more about the history of queer LGBT community in Central Asia or in Afghanistan, and just the development of our culture as queer people before Russians came, before the Russian invasion, and how it was seen by the community at the time, right? Because I have to say the current government and Soviet Union did the same thing. They erased the queer culture in general from the memories of people, from the history, and it's very hard to find anything in archives. I mean, I guess I know So I think that would be like enlightening to a lot of people, especially the people who live in Central Asia. You know, when they like, because of they don't know the history of queer people, and the rhetoric is like so aggressive when they like talk to you, ask questions. You know, I had this an argument with I think I've told you this before. I have an argument with this man who was telling me that you know, homosexuality is pedophilia, the bachabazi is pedophilia, and I said I agree by the terms of 21st century it is a pedophilia, but why don't you mention that marrying an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old girl is also pedophilia, which was widely practiced at that time. I want to know what's your thought on it. And you know, it didn't, of course it didn't go anywhere. It was just very he was very like defensive and aggressive and just didn't answer my question, right? So there has to be like this moment of us reclaiming our history and educating people. I guess that has to be an agenda.
Thank you, Anvar. Zhanar and Mahira, if you want to jump in. Zhanar, you want to add something? Yeah.
I think, yeah, of course, it's a very big question. So when, for example, researchers come to Central Asia, of course, it's good. It will be maybe good, or how to say, recommended if you speak with local, if you write about activism with local activists, and take a lot of opinions and try to, yeah, try to be in the field. Because I think when you are deep in the field, you will see a lot of nuances. And I wish just in any topic, try to go deeper and see more nuances than you can maybe catch from the books or from newspapers or from the archives. I think speaking to people is the most focal maybe, because when we try to speak about feminist movement in Kazakhstan, it's not only young feminists or 30 plus with I and my generation, but also feminist league generation, like I don't know, Evgenia Kozyreva, and decade of their activities in 90s. And of course, it's a very also interesting period. They did what they could do in that time when Kazakhstan was so rushing into the UN system and had to sign any convention to, you know, to go into, and they had to show themselves very good and beautiful, I don't know, clothes, to say, yes, I'm a good partner, economical partner, who signed every convention that, yeah, you can imagine, but who will implement them then? And of course, it's you should go deeper than it could be even in the libraries, because yeah, sometimes visits to library is not enough. And I would like just to wish you speak to people and maybe sometimes come back to the field. I think this is also important when you come back to your respondents and maybe update something, some numbers, some, I don't know, some quotes, or just to listen to them. So I think coming back to field work maybe could be something that you could use, and it will reach your research, give you more horizon.
Thank you. Mahira, would you like to have a concluding remark and answer this question as well?
Yeah, I don't know, like it's to me it's a bit always strange, because I actually asked that question several times to different colleagues when I was doing my master's and PhD, I was asking them, so why are you doing research in Central Asia if you're not from Central Asia, right? And I'm sorry, like I don't want to like be a gatekeeper or like I just I think we should try to maybe investigate, politicize where we are, right? And then it can be related to also other places in the world, right? So for instance, we know there's a history of international solidarity in women's movement and queer movements. And, for instance, yeah, like we can look at history of Langston Hughes, travels in Central Asia, and he wrote about the dancing boys culture, and he was fascinated by it. But he was also a socialist, right? He was in solidarity with this new state, and he really marveled at how brown people, had power in this new Soviet state, and he was comparing that with his own situation, in the United States. And I think we can probably look, as an American, you can look into this kind of history of linkages, yeah, between American politics and Central Asia, and yeah, actually a lot of knowledge is preserved in Western archives that we don't have access to here in Central Asia. So I actually have experience of traveling to Columbia University and using the library there and finding there all these books from Central Asia in Russian, in Tajik, when I was doing my PhD research, which I never would have been able to access in Central Asia, right? I didn't even know they existed. So I think you can use this kind of position of relative privilege and access to resources. And I would say, invite Central Asian scholars and do collaborations with them and share your resources. And, I'm an academic here in Bishkek. I don't have tenure. I work on 1-year contracts. I don't get sabbaticals. So I have a lot of research data lying around. I just don't have time to write a book. So, invite me, give me a sabbatical and we can write something together. So yeah, sorry about this self-serving comment, but I think, yeah, we should really do this kind of research in solidarity also with activists and academics in Central Asia.
I really want to say a huge thank you to our panelists, and Anvar unfortunately had to go back to work, but ZHANAR, MOHIRA, Anvar, thank you so much for your time, for your precious and very sobering insight about what's happening on the ground. I really hope that this is a continuing conversation, and I really hope that all of us who are related to Central Asia in one way or another, we will have another gathering of the sort. And sadly, we didn't even answer half of the questions. Hopefully, we'll continue the conversation. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. A special thank you to our wonderful interpreter. And we will be posting the recording of this event on Rusa LGBT's social media channels if you would like to revisit or share it with your colleagues. And again, we would like to acknowledge the graduate student workers' strike here at Columbia University. We stand in solidarity with them in their struggle for equal treatment under oppressive institutional systems. Thank you all, and in solidarity with you all, I'm saying goodbye. Please be safe. Yeah, hopefully we'll do that again in the future. Thank you all.